Good evening, I'm Scott Williams, Membership Director of the League of American Bicyclists and your host for the January Club Leadership Webinar, focusing, as we always do in January, on the upcoming year's insurance program. Without further ado, I will turn you over to Marla Peters, who is our point person for insurance at American Specialty, and she will talk to you about the program, and then you will have your opportunity to ask questions about how the program works for you. Marla, thanks for joining me tonight.
Thanks, Scott, and hello to everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. I know that insurance is a very important topic to everyone, but not always the favorite way to maybe spend your evening, so I do appreciate you taking the time to participate tonight. A little bit about our company, American Specialty. We specialize exclusively in sports and entertainment insurance and risk management, and we have had the opportunity to have a long-term relationship to work with the League of American Bicyclists and its members. One thing that's probably helpful to clarify that is sometimes a point of confusion is that American Specialty is not actually an insurance company, so we are not the company that is taking the risk and paying the claims at the end of the day, but we are a broker who is working on behalf of the League of American Bicyclists to place the insurance coverage with insurance companies. And then there are certain authorities that we actually have on behalf of the insurance company in terms of claims management and in some cases some aspects of underwriting. So just a little clarification there. We have 11 service team members at American Specialty that work on serving the League of American Bicyclists program, and Renee and I are the main point people, and Renee is the person that many of you on the phone, if you have participated in the program, have maybe spoken to her with your questions or when you need a certificate of insurance. So Renee's contact information will be provided at the end. And then also, as I mentioned, we have claims staff here who will be working with you in the event that you have a claim at some point in the process. The League, I just wanted to say real quickly that we have a great relationship with the League, and I think you can feel comfortable as members that they are being strong advocates on your behalf and always making sure that we are informed as to what the current and contemporary needs are of the membership so that we can make sure the insurance program keeps up with it. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about tonight is an example of that, because really starting 2 years ago, we made a concerted effort to work together. I know the League's been doing some surveys to make sure that our insurance program is keeping up with the coverage needs of the clubs. So that was by a little way of background. In terms of what to expect for the 2013 program, again, we are going to provide coverage that is customized specifically for bicycle clubs and advocacy organizations that's affordable and easy to purchase. That's always a focus of the program. We always want to make sure the coverage matches what your activities actually are. We have made some modifications that we're going to be getting into this year that hopefully make the program a better fit for the activities of bicycle clubs and advocacy organizations. So we've made some tweaks and enhancements and modifications that we are going to be talking about to hopefully make the program work better for you. This last point, I hate to start the presentation out on this note, but at the same time I want to be upfront and not try to hide anything, but we are looking at a situation for 2013 where the rates are increasing, and that is going to result in, maybe not for all clubs based on some of the other changes we're making, but for many clubs it will result in a premium increase compared to what you paid last year. And the reason for that, I want to give a little background before at the end we'll talk about what the actual rates are, but we have had within the program, within the last 5 years, unfortunately, 2 liability losses that have exceeded $400,000. So those are obviously big impact dollar losses that are impacting the premium on the liability side. And on the participant accident, losses have been steadily increasing really since 2009. And the insurance company on that, Mutual of Omaha, has actually lost money every year since 2009. And so they were looking this year that there needed to be a correction because obviously any insurance company knowing that they're going to lose money won't continue to go down that path. So that's where that's coming from. And on top of it, we kind of described it to the league as the perfect storm, because the insurance market, for any of you that are involved from a business perspective or that type of thing, the commercial liability market is tightening, meaning that insurance companies are becoming more restrictive with their coverages and their pricing is going up. So that's happening even for loss-free business. So I wanted to give you that background so you do understand. The good news, it's following a period of time where the rates were either decreasing or flat since 2007, with last year being the first year we had a slight increase in the rates. So it's not that it's been a trend over many years, but it is something that is going to be an impact this year. So moving on from that, I wanted to just get into a little bit about the program, who can join, and we'll talk about some of the changes I mentioned. First of all, and most importantly, you have to be a member of the League of American Bicyclists. You have to have a current membership status and maintain that current membership status. And your primary purpose has to be to promote or organize bicycling activities. You don't need to be incorporated or have tax-exempt status. And one clarification we needed to make is that entities whose primary focus is mountain biking are not eligible. That doesn't mean that if you do some mountain biking that you aren't eligible. If primarily you're doing on-road type rides and special events, that is fine. But if literally your name is the such and such mountain bike club and that's why you exist, that program would probably be best served through one of the mountain biking programs that are available, because that activity from an insurance perspective is viewed as being a higher risk, and so our rates would be a lot lower than what you're going to see, which is why some mountain biking clubs have wanted to join the League's program in the past, but we did have to make that clarification. One of the things that we started asking last year for the first time as part of the insurance is whether you are a bicycle club or an advocacy organization. And we always had a little bit different approach where we told the advocacy organizations to count people differently when they signed up for the purpose of their premium. But it was a little confusing and didn't really make sense. We were a little bit trying to fit the advocacy organizations into a bicycle club format. And with the advocacy groups growing in the country, the number of them, and they represent 20% of the participating organizations in the League's insurance program, we really wanted to make things better fit. So we're going to be looking at it a little differently this year. So if you are an advocacy organization, and basically how I would define that for the purpose of this insurance program is that basically you're likely to have a large membership base that mostly donates money to support all of your projects and your initiatives, but you don't really do very many club rides because that's not really your focus. So if you conduct 12 or fewer club rides, the type of rides where you're not charging an admission fee and it's mostly just designed for your members, if you are doing 12 or fewer of those a year and they have an average of 50 or fewer riders, then you can enroll as an advocacy organization. The advocacy organizations in 2013 are going to pay a flat premium to join the program that isn't impacted by membership size, so you're not even going to get asked how many members you have. And also, you will be asked, do you conduct any club rides? Do you conduct rides throughout the year that are basically for your members and you don't charge any type of a registration fee? And if you say no, then you will not be charged for participant accident premium. We're going to talk about what that is later. But that is new this year. But one key, which I think I make several times throughout this presentation, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but if you say at the time you sign up that you don't do any of these rides, then you will not have any coverage for these rides. So it's really important that if you do conduct any of them, that you go ahead and report that up front. Bicycle clubs are going to continue to pay a membership-based premium to join the program, which is subject to a minimum premium amount. One clarification we make is that when you have family memberships, so maybe one family membership might have 10 people in it, but we ask you to report those as 2 individual members when you count people. And then all the other premiums that apply that we'll be talking about that are separate from that original kind of sign-up premium, they are the same for bicycle clubs and advocacy organizations. So, for example, the special event rates for those rides where you're charging for participation, those have the same rates and they work the same for advocacy and bicycle clubs. So, Scott, are we good to keep moving along into getting into the details of the insurance?
Yes, do. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. I wanted to make sure you're still there too, because when I'm talking, I'm worried that I'm talking to myself. So, okay. So, getting into the actual insurance program itself, we think about it in two parts. There is the part of the program that you automatically get when you sign up, and those are the general liability and participant accident coverages, and we will talk about what those are. But there are also optional coverages that you can purchase separately. You can purchase additional general liability limits, up basically an additional $1 million of coverage. You can purchase directors and officers liability coverage, which is for your board of directors for any wrongful act type of claims that may occur. And then also non-owned and hired auto liability, which applies to auto type of claims, and we will again give you more information on when you would need that. So moving on to the general liability side, general liability coverage is the coverage that you need when you are sued. So it provides coverage for the attorney fees that defend you, and it provides coverage for any judgments or settlements that might be made against you if you are found to be liable for whatever the loss is that has occurred. And it covers three different types of claims. The most important and frequent one with respect to what bike clubs do is bodily injury claims. And a bodily injury claim is either a member or a pedestrian who's not related to your event, or a participant in a special event who is injured and looks to the club for reimbursement for their medical bills, pain and suffering, loss of work hours, those type of things. To give you a couple examples, I mentioned this earlier on, but we have had in the last 5 years 2 claims that are both currently open, and they both have exceeded $400,000 in terms of either what's been paid or what is expected to be paid. And those kind of develop over time. They could become smaller. Usually it goes the other way where it's underestimated and they're larger than what is projected. Both of these claims, I think it's notable, occurred from a cyclist striking a person who was walking on a trail. And in both cases, the person who was the pedestrian received very substantial injuries and was not related in any way to our event. So one thing that doesn't occur when you run into someone who's not related to your event or your club is that you don't have that goodwill feeling coming from them. We don't see a lot of claims coming from your actual club members, and one of our theories for why that is because you are probably friends and have relationships with these individuals, and they're just less likely to want to sue the officers of the club or sue the club that they probably have great support for and appreciation for. We did this other claim, which I had actually mentioned on our call last year, it was from a ride participant who struck a pothole and fell, and somebody ran over his arm and he had a fractured arm. So obviously a lower dollar claim, but it gives you another example of the type of claim. On the property damage liability side, this is property damage as in you don't own it, it's not in your control, you didn't rent it, it's not your owned bike. It's actually random third party's property that you damage. So you run into a building, or in these 2 examples, which we didn't have any of these claims in this past year, so these are older examples. But a rider striking a vehicle and causing damage to the vehicle, or causing damage to a vehicle that was in a designated parking area. I think that was a tent that fell on it or something like that happened in that situation. But again, if it is something you are renting or borrowing, that is not going to be covered under this because it's in your club's care or control. And so what you need to make sure of is if you rent or borrow that type of property, you understand your financial obligation and you know that you are able to cover that. We did have a claim that was denied from a tent that was damaged that a club had borrowed this past year. So that was an out-of-pocket cost for that club. And then the only exception to that is the sports equipment liability benefit that we have through the league, which is a customized coverage specifically for this league program, and it covers sports equipment that is in your care, custody, or control, which is basically going to be a bike valet or bike corral type of a situation. And this is an example of an actual claim, again, not this past year, but previous year, where a custom-built bicycle was stolen from a bicycle corral provided by the club. And so the club ended up being responsible, and that ended up being covered by insurance. And there is a deductible that applies to that in a $5,000 limit. In terms of when the coverage applies, this is always a very big question, and it should be a big question for clubs. Or I guess this is the who does it cover slide, sorry. Then we're going to talk about when. It covers your club or your advocacy organization as long as you enrolled and paid your premium. It covers members of the club, volunteers of the club, and the directors, officers, employees of the club. So when we talk about, keep this in mind, when we talk about directors and officers liability, the directors and officers and employees are covered under this general liability policy for all the things we just talked about. The things they're covered for under that quote-unquote directors and officers policy are different types of claims, which we'll talk about. But that's a notable point. You don't have to buy the D&O coverage for the directors and officers to have coverage for probably your biggest area of exposure. And then with respect only to covered rides, first-time invited guests are also included on the general liability policy. In terms of when they are covered, we basically look at it in three different categories. Your club rides, and basically your club rides are the rides where no fee is charged. So recreational bicycle rides conducted and supervised by an insured club for which no fee is charged. Here's my disclaimer again. If you're an advocacy organization and when you sign up you say you don't have any rides, then you don't have this coverage. And in theory, you don't need this coverage, and that's why you said you didn't have any rides. But I still want to point it out because if you say that at the beginning of the year and then decide to have a couple club rides, you'll need to sign those up as special events. So that's a note that's just specific to advocacy organizations. One other clarification on that piece is that if you have a bicycle club and you have an event that you only open up to your members but you do charge a fee for some reason to those members, that also can fall under the club ride category because clubs pay for their premium based on their members. And so if you have a ride that's only for your members, even if you do have the fee associated, we're not going to have you have to pay for that again separately under a special event. Special events then, by definition, are what aren't club rides, which are rides where you do charge a fee. And special events have to be reported prior to the event, and then the appropriate premium has to be paid following the event. And that premium is based on the number of participants in the ride. And so that's why we don't make you pay until after, because a lot of times clubs in the past have said, well, we don't know how many people are going to show up for our special event. And we used to have this big reconciling process, and you'd report how many you thought, and then that would be another example of where I think we've improved the program in terms of user-friendliness, because you just have to let us know of the event before, and then you have to pay for it within 2 weeks. And then this other category is kind of a catch-all, which is for all your bicycle-related activities. And for both clubs and advocacy organizations, this picks up your advocacy-type work, because we know that bicycle clubs do advocacy work, just like advocacy organizations might have a few rides in a year. So this examples are club meetings, your fundraisers, time trials, not racing against each other in time trials, but individual timing events that you have as time trials are covered. Your bike education courses are covered, assuming that you tell us you do conduct education courses, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about why that's important later, because we've changed the structure of the program a little bit in that area. Trail maintenance, cleanup, that type of thing, light maintenance that you're doing. Promoting safe routes to school programs, and again, that's an important clarification this year. We're basically saying that your safe routes to school advocacy efforts are all covered. The only exception, which I'll talk about in a future slide, is if you are literally organizing and running a day-to-day, kind of throughout the year, walking school bus program or bike train type of a program. But if you're doing just a bike walk to school day promotion, that will fall within this coverage. And again, that's something the league worked with us this year to expand upon what we had provided last year. So I think that will be something a lot of advocacy groups or bike clubs that are involved in this type of initiative should be pleased to hear that development. It was the league's impression from doing some survey work that most of the clubs are not involved in actually organizing or running any type of a walking school bus, even though you might be encouraging other people to set those types of things up. So, and then bike refurbishment. So if you are if you're bringing in used bikes, fixing them up, and then maybe donating them in the community, or even fixing them up and selling them at a reduced cost, that can be covered if you purchase the optional coverage that's available. The limits for general liability are $1 million for each occurrence, regardless of the number of people that get injured in the occurrence. As I mentioned, you can buy an additional $1 million limit, and it's usually generally relatively inexpensive. It's underwritten specifically based on the number of special events and membership that you have. There's a $3 million general aggregate, but it applies to each of you individually and to your special events individually, and that just means that's the most that could be paid during the course of the year. So hopefully none of you ever have 3 $1 million claims in one year, because that would really be a bad year. But if you did, you would not have any more limit available after that. Defense costs are in addition to the limit, which is a huge thing, because in most of the claims that we see in the sporting world, the majority of the costs are defense costs. Now, every once in a while, there is a large settlement. We are responsible for what happened, and then a settlement is made or a judgment is made against our insured. But for the most part, a lot of times there's just a lot of money paid to defend yourself, and then you end up being found that you weren't negligent. But in the meantime, if $200,000 has been spent, obviously that's not something you want your club to have to pay out of pocket. And then, as I mentioned before, that sports equipment liability benefit has a $5,000 limit and a $500 per claim deductible. One of the things that always people have quite a few questions about, and they should, because it's a really important area, is with respect to a waiver and release documents. They are an important method to protect your club. The value of them does vary by jurisdiction. So some of you might be in a state where someone has told you waivers are useless in the state. People might have told you they're useless relative to minors, and in some states that's true. And they are not as strong of a defense tool when minor participants are involved. But we know that they are a very important tool, and I would say not just specific to the league, but across all of what we do in the world of sports, because people are generally aware that they are taking on a risk when they get on a bike. And what the waiver does is say that they realize that, and they agree not to sue you. So some people say, well, it's not fair to make people give up their rights, but at the same time, do you want to really protect their right to sue you? I mean, that's the question you have to think about, and each person has their own philosophical decision to make. But our understanding is that for the most part, that the league members are very diligent about getting waivers, and I can tell you that we had, I know, at least 3 or 4 liability potential claims come in this year where the clubs all produced a signed waiver, and one specifically we feel that the claim went away because of the existence of the waiver, because the individual who was injured had an attorney, and when we produced the signed waiver, the lawsuit got dropped, or the claim got dropped and didn't turn into a lawsuit. So they are important. There is a sample waiver with recommended wording that is on the league's website, and it's also on the insurance website that we're going to be giving you later. We always recommend you work with your local legal counsel because this waiver we provide is designed to work as best as it can in as many jurisdictions as it can across the country. But if there's something locally that your legal counsel recommends, then you can certainly adapt that for your needs. We recommend that you secure one waiver per year from your members for your bicycle clubs. Not that you necessarily have to collect one every time somebody goes on a ride, but with respect to special events, we suggest you get one every time from every special event participant, even if they are a club member. It's just an added level of protection. Coverage does not apply to racing. It does not apply to commercial bike or repair shops, for-profit tours. And again, I think we've received some questions on this point. So that doesn't mean that if your club is going on a 5-day event and your members are having to pay, the cost to cover their expenses on the trip, and your club runs that through the club, that is not a for-profit tour that would bring this restriction into place. We're actually talking about those large, massive tours that are money-making endeavors for the organizers of them. They are set up to make a profit, and they charge the participants accordingly. And as I mentioned before, with Safe Routes to School, the coverage is going to be very broad relative to your advocacy work and promoting those activities, but it does not extend to if you literally are going out and finding volunteers who are walking kids to and from school on a day-to-day basis throughout the school year, or riding with them. And I think an important thing also to note is that the policy does not cover abuse and molestation claims, and so you really don't want to put yourself in that position where you have hired in any way or put in place as your agent someone who has direct access on a regular, everyday basis to small children. So that is just our recommendation. And then with respect to alcohol-related losses, you do have what is called host liquor liability, which means if you aren't in the business of selling, furnishing, or distributing alcohol, and you have an event where you have some beer and wine available as part of that, if it's a fundraiser or whatever, that generally is going to be picked up. But if there's any time that you're actually having to pull your own permit, or you're getting the servers, or you are charging for the sale of alcohol, we recommend that you call Renee, because we'll just walk through it with you and let you know if we recommend that you buy liquor liability coverage, because if you're in the business of the selling or distributing, then there's an exclusion on the liability policy that you would want to be aware of and make sure you have the right coverage. So switching gears, so all this time just now we were talking about the coverage that applies if you are sued. We're now switching to a coverage that there doesn't have to be any lawsuit or anything like that. It's what the insurance industry calls a first-party coverage, and this covers medical bills related to injuries that occur when people are on your covered rides. It's excess of the person's own insurance. Something interesting with respect to the league is that in general, if we look back historically, about 90% of the excess medical claims, about 90% of the time the people do have other insurance. So what that means the league's program is paying is what's not paid by their insurance, which is generally deductibles and copays, which we all know are becoming bigger and bigger in many cases. So it's actually the value of it probably becoming more important to people, even though most of you already have the actual medical insurance in place. So we're not paying this usually as a first party. If someone doesn't have accident or their own health insurance, though, this does pay on a primary basis after the league's deductible is applied. And there's also an accidental death and dismemberment benefit that comes into play in the event of a fatality. And I just listed some claim examples here, but you're all, I'm sure, aware of the type of things that can happen on your rides, and what we see is consistent with what you would expect in that program. In terms of when it covers and who it covers, it's a little different from the general liability because as you probably realize, the general liability coverage is very broad, designed to pick up a lot of your meetings and your fundraisers and all those type of things that you may be doing. The participant accident coverage is really focused on athletic activity, and it's focused on your rides. So it covers the members of your club and their first-time invited guests on club rides. So again, those are the ones where people aren't having to pay to participate. And again, there's my little disclaimer that if you say you don't do any in your advocacy organization, then you won't have that coverage. It also covers all the registered participants and volunteers during special events. And again, we talked about kind of that goodwill factor versus not having goodwill. One of the reasons that liability insurance companies require many times in the sports world that participant accident coverage be in place and before the liability carrier will insure you is the idea that if somebody falls and breaks a leg and they have an $8,000 bill, you would rather pay them the $8,000 regardless of fault through this type of coverage as opposed to have them sue you for $8,000, which will end up costing $30,000 when you have legal fees involved in that type of thing. So, and the other thing, this next point is new, is that all attendees of bicycle education courses organized by your club will be covered for their on-bicycle activities if you have on-bicycle activities and if you have bike education courses. And in the past, that was not in place. There is going to be a charge for the education courses this year, but it's going to be a lot easier to understand than it might have been in the past with it was tied in with whether you charged for the course or not, and I noticed our FAQ on it was like 14 pages long. So I think that we have done a good job of clarifying and making this easier this year. Again, if you say that you don't do any bicycle education, then you will not be charged for it, which is good. But then if you decide that you want to have some courses, you need to give us a call because, again, you won't have coverage for that if you've represented up front that you don't do it and then you don't pay for it. So that's something to note that's important for next year or for this year. The limit is $10,000 per person per accident. It's excess of a $500 disappearing deductible. When I say disappearing, that means that if your insurance has paid $500 or either your insurance or some source has paid the LAB deductible, then your deductible will disappear. In essence, what it means is that people who are injured on your rides, your members, can end up paying $0 out of pocket, which is a nice benefit, and I think one that you can use as a selling point for people when they're thinking about, do I want to be a member or do I just want to show up all the time and kind of tag along and never become a paying member. You can use that as an incentive that you get some important insurance benefits. And the accidental death and dismemberment benefit is $5,000 per person. And all these limits are consistent with what they have been in the past. Anything we're changing, I'm going to highlight and point out to you as we go along. You still are going to purchase the insurance at the same website where you have right now. If you go on there, it says it's unavailable. Our IT department is working feverishly to put in place all these tweaks and changes we've made in how the coverage is paid for. And so that will be up and available on the 21st. So we're working really hard to make sure that that's available and that you have that lead time prior to February 1st to get all signed up. And the enrollment process is very, we think, you can tell us if we're fooling ourselves, but I'm sure you can tell Renee, but we think that it is streamlined, shouldn't take you too long. If you do, however, have an issue where you can't enroll online for some reason, you can call and we will walk you through, and we're going to be doing the enrollment online, but we'll be doing it on your behalf, basically. Premium, as I mentioned, for coverage other than special event coverage will all be paid for at the time of your enrollment, and then the special event premium is paid for after based on your actual participation. An important note that I know has been something that we needed to advertise more or be really clear about it in our materials, and we're working to do that, is that bicycle clubs do not have to count your existing members in your special event participation figures. Advocacy organizations do, And the reason for the distinction is that bicycle clubs are paying based on your membership. So in essence, you've already paid for those individuals to participate throughout the year, and we're not making them pay again when they're in a special event versus a regular club ride. But for advocacy organizations, they're going to be paying a flat fee, and it's not based on their membership numbers, and so they really need to count everybody when they are reporting their special event numbers. And coverage begins at the time that you enroll and pay. If you do it before February 1st, then the coverage will start on February 1st. If you do it after, the coverage will start after, but it will still end on February 1st. So it's to your best interest to put the coverage in place before February 1st so you don't have any lapse in coverage from year to year and you get the full benefit of the premium you're paying. There are discounts that apply after August from a rate perspective, but you still will have to pay the full minimum premium even after August 1st. So now we have come to the cost aspect of the program, and here's where there are some changes. I mentioned already that the rates are higher, and so you're obviously going to see that when we go through this. But also there's just a few things where the charges are going to be done in a different way. So for bicycle clubs, the payment process is the same. And what you see on the slide here are the rates that apply and the minimum premium that will apply per club. And that, again, is not counting any special events that you have. That's just to sign up and become part of the program and for your regular year-round activities. And then advocacy organizations who report that they do not have any club rides will pay a $68 flat premium. And they will not have any PA coverage because there's no reason because they don't have any rides when that would apply. If you indicate you do conduct club rides at the time that you enroll, your premium will be $133, and that includes the general liability and the participant accident, again, for members who participate on those rides. But you have to have the 12 or fewer rides a year that we mentioned with 50 or fewer participants on average. If you have more than that, then really for the purposes of this program, you are a bicycle club, because we're basically saying advocacy organizations have a small number of rides, and we've defined small number as 12 or fewer. And the reason it's defined that way is based on feedback and surveys conducted by the league that basically indicated that for the most part, anyone who identified themselves as an advocacy organization but said they had some club rides literally were doing like one a month or less or fewer. So that's why, just to give you background on where that came from. If you rent, lease, or own year-round office space, there will be a $50 charge that will automatically apply. Based on our enrollment information last year, this applies to a very small number of clubs, but it is a charge that, you know, if we looked at it, we should have been making it on behalf of the insurance company we work with for many years. We didn't really realize that there were clubs out there that had year-round office space. And it's a different exposure of people coming and going to and from your office, and you usually have a lease with your landlord where you're taking on some additional liability. So that charge will apply. And this next part is on the bicycle education courses. These numbers you see here are not per course or anything like that. They are a year-long. We won't ask you how many courses you're doing or anything like that. It's just a flat premium that's going to apply. And a big bonus that really shows, I think, the insurance company's faith in the fact that utilizing LCIs who are trained as your instructors reduces the risk. And so the prices are lower if you use LCIs. It's actually a 25% discount. You will have to represent when you sign up that we use only LCIs as instructors for our courses. And if you indicate that, then there will be a subsequent question that will ask, do you have classroom-only type, or do you sometimes have on-bike instruction? And if it's classroom-only, there's going to be a $30 premium charge. If you do classroom and on-bike, it'll be $120. And when you add that on-bike, you are adding, there's really two components that are driving that price up. One is that you're including the participant accident, which applies now to all of your class participants if they get hurt on an on-bike portion of the course. But also your liability exposure goes up somewhat, and so part of that $120, if you're looking at it compared to the $30, is also driven by the general liability costing a little more. And then same logic, but if you sometimes use non-LCIs, which we do not recommend, but if you do, then the prices are 25% higher for those same, whether you have classroom only or whether you also include on-bike instruction. Again, it's a good offset of liability for your club to be providing participant accident coverage to those participants who are taking part in on-bike instruction. And, in theory, all along, we always should have required all of the people doing any type of athletic activities to have the participant accident coverage, but now we are adding that feature to the program. And then the bicycle refurbishment coverage, which is an optional coverage. These other coverages we mentioned aren't optional. When you say you do them, the price will get calculated into your final premium. But the bicycle refurbishment is an optional coverage. And again, if you are bringing in bikes, fixing them up, and donating them out to the community, then you can make sure you have coverage for kind of that product liability exposure that comes into play there, where you're doing mechanical work on something, and somebody could come back if they crash and say that you didn't have the brakes constructed properly or that it had a maintenance issue with respect to something you did. One thing we recommend is that for anybody who does bicycle refurbishment, we recommend you do purchase that coverage, but also that you keep good records of who you have given a bike to, if it's a donation program, or sold a bike to, so that if you do have someone come back and say, hey, I got this bike here and it's, I got in this terrible accident and you owe me $100,000, that you'll be able to look in your records to make sure you in fact did give that person a bike. So that's a risk management recommendation we have. And then this slide shows the special event rates for this year. It shows the minimum premiums that are going to apply. Again, it reiterates that bicycle clubs do not need to count your members who participate in special events, but advocacy organizations do. And then this optional participant accident coverage, when this would come into play, is that a lot of times you might have an event that you aren't charging a fee to participate, and therefore you don't need to register it as a special event, but you may be opening it to the public and allowing, lots of non-members to be participating. Well, none of those non-members will have participant accident coverage for that event, especially if they're not first-time invited guests. And so if you would like to provide the coverage for them, you can purchase that, and you do that just by calling American Specialty. We don't do that online. And there's a minimum premium that applies. And we've had about 25 to 30 events that are added like that annually. So that is available as well. Scott, do you want to pause for any questions now before I go into auto liability and directors and officers, or have me go ahead and finish up?
Why don't you go ahead and finish up? I do have a lot of questions, but I think we'll just go ahead and do them all at the end because they really covered the breadth of the things you've talked about. So throw a couple more things and people will get some more questions, and then I'll try to group them as best as I can.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so switching on to, when we talked about general liability coverage, I guess I should have said that a notable aspect of that is it doesn't apply to claims involving vehicle accidents. And the coverage that does apply to that is auto liability coverage. And in this case, we call it non-owned and hired auto liability coverage. And what that basically means is that it applies not to any vehicles that your club owns. If your club owns a car, you do need to work with a local agent to be securing insurance coverage for that. But if you sometimes rent a vehicle to use in one of your events, or because you're traveling on behalf of your club and maybe to a conference and you've rented a car that your club's reimbursing you for, this coverage can apply to that. And also, maybe a more likely or frequent scenario is that you, the club, have asked people to drive their own cars on behalf of the club, and the club could have liability relative to the fact that you asked that person to drive on your behalf. It doesn't cover the driver of the vehicle, because they really should have their own insurance coverage, hopefully, if they're driving on your behalf, and that it's current, and hopefully they have a driver's license, which we recommend you would ask them to show you evidence of. Again, a risk management suggestion. But if they do get involved in an accident and the club gets named, the only way to have coverage is if you buy this separate coverage, which we were able to make available affordably through the league a couple years ago for the first time. And several clubs have taken advantage of it. It's actually underwritten separately. You do have to provide us with some minimal underwriting information. We try to keep it really simple, and almost always the club premium ends up being $250 for that, for $1 million limit. So that's the non-owned and hired auto. I think I covered all that. And then the directors and officers liability coverage, I mentioned before that it's not that they aren't covered unless you buy this. It's that they're covered for the bodily injury and all those type of claims we talked about, but they aren't covered for types of claims like mismanagement of funds, negligent decision making. The more common types of directors and officers claims, which are another component of the program called employment practices liability, are from employees who may bring a claim. And I know a lot of clubs don't have employees, but we did learn last year that a lot of you do, or some of you do. So you definitely would want absolutely to have the employment practices coverage, which is part of this program. Discrimination claims are probably also maybe the more typical for a nonprofit. So you have someone in your club or you have someone on your board that you dismissed, or maybe they just are not being safe or prudent, and there's a decision made by the board to not allow them to be a member, and those type of claims can be picked up under directors and officers liability. It covers the club as an entity, your board of directors, and your volunteers, and you, again, enroll through, you go to it through the league's website, but it's through another program that we offer. You have your own limit and all of that, but it's a separate kind of enrollment platform. And there is a retention, which is the equivalent of the deductible we've been talking about, of $500 per claim for D&O and $1,000 per claim for an employment practices claim. That coverage, we were able to keep the premium flat this year, which is great because I don't think I've seen any D&O renewal for any of my clients this year that didn't go up by at least 5 or 10%. So the premium is the same this year as it was last year. The coverage begins the day following the purchase and after February 1st, 2013, and it applies through February 1st, 2014. It is prorated, which is, on a straight prorated basis, which is a little different from what we talked about before. So if you buy it a month later, you're going to pay for 11 months worth of the coverage. And then the premiums for those respective limits are shown there. We're almost at the end. The LCI coverage, that if we have any LCIs on the phone, is what you have been waiting for with bated breath. The LCIs and seminar coaches automatically have general liability coverage through the league, and it applies when they are conducting smart cycling seminars and classes conducted in accordance with league procedures. So if you're teaching league principles and the things you learned when you were trained to be an LCI, then your coverage just automatically follows you around for those activities. Sometimes you may need a certificate of insurance if you're utilizing a school to conduct your class, or you're utilizing a public building of some type and they want evidence that you actually have coverage. You get that through American Specialty. There's not a cost for that, and we can turn those requests around quickly. So that's a great benefit to anyone who is thinking about becoming an LCI. And we've now got the tie-in with the club program where if they utilize your services, they're getting a discount on their coverage as well. So I think that's a great element that we were able to add to the program this year. And then lastly, I told Scott, I guess it's funny that I, Marla, am talking the whole entire time, and then at the end I say, and if you have questions or need anything, feel free to contact Renee. Renee is sitting here with me very quietly. She's usually not that quiet. But anyway, her contact information is here. We've got the 800 number, or you can call her direct, and then email obviously is always a great method as well. So we will be glad to, and I should say also that I am always available to answer questions if Renee is out. We have a good kind of depth going here with different people involved, so we can always answer your questions and get back to you. And so that is the formal part of the presentation. If we want to switch over to the question and answer part.
Absolutely. Let's get to it. So that people get a chance to hear a voice that's not yours or mine, I'm first going to try to call on the people who have their hands up. And so if you have your hand up, I'm about to call on you. I hope you're able to speak and that you have a question. Otherwise, I'm stalling just a little right now, so you have a chance to put your hand down. Oh, there went one of the hands. Lance Jacobs, are you there? Do you have a question to ask? Lance, you're unmuted. Can you speak? That's a no. Harry DeMall, are you there? Do you have a question you'd like to ask out loud? Comment to make? Harry? Ellie Nesper, are you there? Do you have a question?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I put the question in writing, but it wasn't answered. During our week-long special event, we offer a nightly education program, about an hour per evening for 5 nights. It is taught by an LCI instructor. Do we need to pay the education course premium in addition to our event fee? It's not a formal tour. So yes, we should.
My initial, that wasn't something that I guess we specifically talked about. Is that your only education activity that you do throughout the year?
Yes.
And you consider it to be part of your special event?
Yes, we do. It's something that we advertise as part of our special event.
I would say no, that you don't need to do that, to pay this separate fee.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate the answer.
You're welcome.
All right, that's actually that's a good lead-in to a couple of other questions that came in about what is considered under the education. Here is one that if you're having a general membership meeting and a guest speaker at this meeting is giving riding advice, is doing the kind of thing that bike education that would be considered bike education under different circumstances. Does that count as something that you need additional coverage for?
Not if it's really a club meeting and you have a guest speaker who happens to be talking about safety. We're talking more about that you are organizing a class. Maybe you're going to a local library and having a class, 1 night a week for 4 weeks, where people who are most likely unrelated to your club are coming in and you're providing them with education. That was the scenario that we were focused on.
Okay, and in a similar vein, and I think with a similar answer, a lot of clubs do ride leader training. They educate their members to lead their rides. Does that require special coverage?
No, I think that falls in the same category.
Okay. Jody Zurinen? Have I pronounced that correctly?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. My computer must have a microphone on it. So my question is, we do a Safe Routes to School program that is, last year was 6 bike rodeos where we took the bikes to the schools, but it's not a daily walking school bus type thing. So I guess where's the line in terms of what's covered for Safe Routes and what is not?
I think, let me read what the specific wording is, if I can locate it. I have all these different, all my materials here. Here's the exclusion that is going to be on the policy. So it's kind of it's covered unless it's excluded type of an approach. And the exclusion is going to say, organizing or supervising a walking school bus, bike train, or similar program that involves the regular transportation of minors to and from school. This exclusion does not apply to organizing or supervising a bike walk to school day or activities to encourage other organizations to establish such programs. So I feel, and it'll be interesting to see if you agree, but based on what you described, I don't feel that that falls within that wording, that exclusionary wording.
Yeah, we're taking the bikes to school, but when they're biking or walking to or from school, we're not part of that directly. It's, well, okay.
But I think
When you say you're taking the bikes to school, do you mean you're providing the bikes, but you're not supervising the kids?
It's like a gym class with bikes, so it would be field day, you know, a half-day type thing, not like a one-time deal. But it's for the purpose of getting them to bike walk to school, but...
No, that I think falls within what we are trying to cover and what I would say is an expansion from what we had said last year when we first started to address this specifically.
Well, thanks.
So if you're doing one-off type activities like that to promote, and you're working in conjunction with the school and that type of thing, that would fall inside. But anything where you are involved with supervising and chaperoning kids day to day to and from school is where there's a pretty distinct cutoff.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And in that situation, would they need the education election?
It didn't sound like an education course. We weren't thinking of bike rodeos as being an education course. We were thinking more of the type of courses that an LCI would put on, which probably has a classroom component where you're learning about the rules of the road and then possibly going out into the parking lot and conducting some on-bike training, or possibly even going on the road and doing some on-bike training.
Okay, Richard Porterfield, your hand is up. You are now unmuted.
Yes, we have probably 400, let's say, official members. But a lot of these are lifetime people that haven't ridden in many years. A lot of them would be spouses of people that do ride. And maybe our actual rider count is on the order of 150. How do we calculate the insurance?
So you do quite a few rides during the year, but you have quite a few members who aren't ever riding.
Yeah, they get the newsletter, they're on the listserv, but they haven't ridden with us in years. They've moved out of the area. They're non-riding spouses, etc. You know, the most they might do is attend an annual dinner, but they don't ride with us anymore. And it's difficult for us to, let's say, separate the numbers between the ones that, you know, the two per family is a real burden for us because we have so many families that are actually, it's one per, but they were registered as a family.
Well, if you, if it's a family membership that's only one person, you only have to count that as one person. We were just getting at the idea where you might have a family membership that sometimes it covers 10 people, and sometimes it's 3, and sometimes it's 2. It was supposed to be actually a benefit to only have to count it as 2. But if you have a lot of family, people who, for whatever reason, joined as a family, but they're just one person, you don't have to count them as 2 people. And
Right.
in terms of the people who never ride, I would say,
Okay.
I'm sorry, what's that?
I said even if they are, in fact, a family unit with a spouse at home, but the spouse never rides, if we can do a reasonable estimate of our accountant.
Right.
Okay.
That's true. And I would say in terms of the dynamic where you have this large element of your membership that doesn't ride, the only way I think that it would work to not report all of them would be if you could create some type of a membership that's not really a riding membership, that's maybe just called a monetary supporter or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think our problem is to a large extent based on the use of lifetime memberships. And then people move out of the area, they retire from riding, etc. But they're on our rolls forever.
Yeah, I mean, you can use some discretion. I would say the membership-based way of paying for the premium is really the best way to estimate. But obviously, Scott and I were talking about this before we all got on the phone together, that it is very difficult with a national program with, although there's a lot of homogeneous elements to what the bike clubs and advocacy organizations do, there's also a lot of variation in how you're set up and what happens, and it's impossible to create a program that works exactly for each of those individual situations. But you do have some discretion. I can say that the program is based on your membership with the idea that most of the members of most bike clubs, it's our understanding, ride. And so if you know for a fact that someone joined as a lifetime member 20 years ago and they've never been on a bike ride with your club, they do not have to be counted. I just think you'd want to try to track them in some way, I think, for your own records, so that there's a way to know why you didn't count that person. They're an inactive member, maybe.
Okay. Have one more quick question. We, not so much as a club, but we have, half a dozen club members that actively refurbish a few hundred bicycles a year for some local giveaway programs. And of course, the club is always referenced in gratitude, etc., for this. Now, once we donate these bicycles, or these individual members donate these bicycles to the other organizations that are actually giving them away, we've kind of lost control over it. Do we need the refurbishment rider?
I personally, although, I'm an insurance agent, so I would err on the side of having that, because anytime you're taking something, fixing it up, and giving it to somebody else with the representation that you gave them a good, solid, workable product, you're kind of in the chain. And maybe someone could never track it back to you, and so it's overly cautious to buy it. But to me, for the amount of money that it costs, I think it's a worthwhile thing to do anytime you have it being done under your club's name or associated with your club.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have some other people interested in speaking. Jim O'Horo, you have your hand up. I know you sent in a couple of questions. Do you want to ask them directly?
You hear me?
Yes, I can.
I have a question regarding the LCI issue again. We have 3 LCIs in our club. And I realized that if the club run.
We ask that you take your phone call out near the elevator.
Oh, I'm in an online seminar. Okay. Sorry, I'm in the library and somebody just told me to shut up.
Oh,
no. We have, as I said, 3 LCIs in the club, and I realized that if the club runs an LCI course, we have to have the LCI coverage. suppose we sponsor the LCI to run it as an evening course in a local community college or something like that, where we pay the college a fee for hosting the course. Are we then still liable for the LCI charges as a club?
If your club is organizing it or making the arrangements, then yes. Even if you are utilizing an LCI, but if you're making the arrangements with the college and you're kind of setting it up, I would say yes. And if you want to avoid that because you don't want to have to pay the education piece, then I would just have the LCIs themselves run those things individually and not involve the club or use the club's name.
And then in that case, just tell the LCI that we would reimburse him for his costs and let him make his own arrangements.
Yeah, I would say that's valid. If you're just what type of cost? You would be reimbursing him for the rental of the space?
Oh yeah, and the use of classrooms and parking lots for exercises and whatnot. In other words, a full LCI course like Road 1, but run through an evening program outside of the club's jurisdiction.
Well, I would say that the reimbursement itself wouldn't make your club be seen as the organizer of it, so I think that's fine and you wouldn't have to pay it, but if there's anything that is representing that this is your club's education course, then I think you would need that coverage. And so if you're going to switch kind of to this model, you would need to make sure the LCI does everything in his or her own name and represents it as his or her own course.
Okay,
Whether
thank you very much.
Pays the LCI, yep, is not going to affect your liability. But if your name's on it, then it pretty much does.
Thanks very much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Don Quiring, I see your hand up. And some others with hands up, I will get to you in just a moment. Don, are you there?
Yes, thank you very much. Just had a quick question, this thing about training and such as that. Quick scenario, there's an organized century coming up. We have no involvement on it, okay? But our members are going to be doing a century. Some of them, this is their first time ever doing a century. So what we have done as a club is requiring people to join to be members, first of all, and then taking these members, having them join like a subgroup, and then talking about nutrition, and actually, you know, we have rides that we do as a club anyway, but this group here does 40 miles this week and then 45 and 50. The idea is preparing them for this century. Now, that's club rides, and I'm sure that's covered. The question that I do have is one of the sessions that we're going to talk about is pace line, where we're going to go out and we're going to be pace line. Now, this sounds like a dumb question maybe to some, but do we have to get insurance to cover this separate thing? This is a separate training thing or something? I mean, it's all club member related only, and you know, it's just like I say, trying to give people, impart the knowledge that some of our experienced people have to these other members that have never done a century.
I don't think that falls under it. And all the questions that are coming up around this make me think that we should try to maybe have a definition of what a bicycle education course is. Of course, that will probably be difficult to define, and it could create more questions than answers, so I might want to think through that. But no, I think that is one of your regular club activities. That's a bicycling-related activity designed for your members, and I wouldn't see that as a bicycle education course.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Crystal Waters, your hand's been up for a while. Are you still with us? You ready?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. We are an advocacy organization. We do bike rodeos and our bike rodeos are supervised by an LCI, especially the active part of it. But we have volunteers at different stations of those rodeos that are working under the supervision of the LCI, but they are not LCIs. Are we covered under the LCI coverage, under that LCI's coverage? And if we pay for the education, do we have to pay the higher cost, the $40 cost, if we use non-LCIs as volunteers?
We weren't really thinking about bike rodeos. I guess, again, hopefully I'm understanding correctly, but I think of a bike rodeo as you've got different stations and the kids are doing different activities. And yes, it's to learn about bike safety and to learn about and to encourage and promote bicycling. But we would look at that from an LCI perspective as an advocacy type of activity to promote cycling and not necessarily an education course. Again, we were thinking the education course more where you've set up and maybe charging people to participate may not be, but you are, having the classroom component where you're teaching people and then doing some on-bike, again, to teach specific skills. So I don't see a bike rodeo, I feel, as more of an advocacy event.
Okay, and you see the education more as teaching more specific skills to either older students or adults?
Right, it could be, or I would say a bicycle education course would be if you've arranged with the school to go in and have an LCI teach a course over a 5-week period, and then at the end of it they go out and they do a parking lot activity as part of this course. That's what we were thinking of more as a bicycle education course. And again, hopefully we're not off base in what we're describing as something that you are thinking that never happens. But from our surveys, that was kind of the impression we got and the distinction we were trying to make.
Okay.
Where maybe a city might even be contracting an advocacy organization to put on a series of bike education courses for the public over a series of a month or two. That's what we were thinking of as the bike education component.
That is something that, in addition to the bike rodeo, that we haven't done it yet, but we are considering the possibility of doing something like that.
Okay, so if you do go down that path, yes. And say at the beginning of the year you sign up and you're not doing that, so you say you don't do it and you don't have a charge for it, but later you decide that you're going to do that type of thing, you just need to give us a call because we can endorse the policy. We can add that coverage on later. So the key is just to let us know if you decide to do it.
Okay, but still there is the key question as, is the instructor, is the LCI instructor, does he have to be overseeing every single participant, or can he oversee the volunteers who then oversee the participants so that you can break up into groups? Are you there?
Yep, I'm here. I'm thinking.
Oh, okay.
I feel if you feel that an LCI is running and supervising the class, the fact that they may have brought in volunteers to help them doesn't mean that you aren't using an LCI to run the class. And I think you could say with a straight face that you are only using LCIs to run your education courses if you go down that path.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Ira Saltiel?
Yes, I am. My question is about how do we count the number of members. When we register in January for the insurance, our membership numbers are relatively low compared with what happens throughout the year. We probably peak in July, August. Do we give you the membership count at January at that time, or what we think it could be later on? That's been discussed at our board meetings, and it's just looking for an answer on that.
You should report the largest number of membership during the year. When we have that question in the past, that has been the guiding principle. So if those are individuals who are signing up and maybe going on your club rides and that type of thing, then they should be counted.
Okay. Thank you.
Did you unmute me, Scott?
We lost Scott.
You're unmuted, Preston. Sorry, I was not. I was muted, but you were unmuted.
Oh, okay. Thank you. First off, Renee is a wonderful person, does a really great job, so everybody be nice to her.
What is your name? I want to write that down.
You know me, Renee. This is Preston Terry in Austin, Texas. I am doing well. I've got 2 questions. We do a lot of training of individuals. We teach people how to ride, and we use LCIs for that. But we also do a lot of bike rodeos, and I'm a little uncomfortable with not having that covered under education, but that's okay because I feel I'm covered as an LCI, and so my LCI coverage does that. But this teaching individuals thing needs to be looked at somewhere along the line, I think, because it's we're doing more and more of it. We're doing 1 to 2 a week, and I know that out in San Francisco they're doing an awful lot of them. So I don't know how that falls in the education part of it.
So it's the club doing one-on-one teaching?
Yeah, our club runs the whole thing. Our club organizes, pays the, takes the money, pays the LCIs, but everything is done through LCIs. But we're doing one-on-one, we're doing bike rodeos, we're doing TS 101, we're doing group riding skills, we're doing a little bit of everything, all of it under smart cycling.
Well, the good news, I think, for your situation is you would be in the boat of one of the clubs who's getting a great advantage from this flat fee approach.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're just stating that, and everything you just described is going to fall either one part of the program or the other. I mean, so you'll be covered for those bicycling-related activities and specifically the education course component of it.
Okay, one other comment I want to make, and I don't think you made it strong enough. You can get sued even though you didn't do anything wrong. And if you're worried about, $40 or $50 on the insurance, go ahead and spend the money on the insurance. It's worth every penny of it. I'm an expert witness. I go into court and I watch people who've gotten sued for, they had absolutely nothing to do with it, but they got sued, and it's much better to have American Specialty standing between you and that suit than try to take it on by yourself. And I will turn off. Go ahead and mute me.
Thank you, Preston. We appreciate that.
It's always a pleasure, Preston. Muting you, I meant. And he can't even answer back. Okay, I have a couple more people with hands up. I think I'm going to take 2 more with hands up. There are a few typed-in questions that I definitely want to get to because there are a couple of themes that keep coming up. If we do not get to all of the questions that have been submitted, we will answer them by email over the course of the next day or so. We'll make sure that we get to everybody's question. There are a lot, and we will do our best in the next 10 minutes or so. Might go just a little bit long, but we will make sure we get to everything that's been asked. And the other thing is just call Renee. At this forum and calling Renee, there are no stupid questions. Just make sure you know what you're covered for and what you're not, and get the coverage that you need. Mark Blackman, are you there? You had a question?
Yes, I am. I have 2 questions. One is, does the special events insurance cover the auto if you have SAG drivers out there for that ride?
No, you would need to buy the non-owned hired auto coverage separately, and you would just contact us, contact Renee, and she would let you know what information we need, and then we would send you a separate proposal, and then it would apply to all your activities throughout the year.
Okay. And secondly, we on our club rides, we get non-club riders, which we do have them sign a waiver, but you know, some of them may come more than once to the ride, a couple times to club rides.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're covered under the insurance part. This is what I'm hearing. We're covered under the insurance part. You know, if they get hurt or something, they turn around and sue us, I take it. But
Right.
they're not covered for, you know, any coverage if they get hurt, you know, or something.
Right. That is correct. So if one of those people just they kind of continually show up and you probably encourage them that you'd like them to become a member but they never do, then if they get hurt, they will not have any of that participant accident coverage that we talked about, so they'll be on their own for any medical bills they incur. But if they did turn around and sue the club would have the defense coverage under the liability part of the program.
And for those
So
that are okay, for those that question, our club a long time ago, maybe 10 years ago, was sued, and I'm pretty sure it was American Specialty at that time covered us under a lawsuit that lasted a while, and it was very, very thorough and did a good job protecting the club. Just a comment.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, I'm going to have try to get one more person to try to find you, Lance. Here you are. Lance Jacobs, do you have a quick question for us? Lance, are you there? I cannot hear you, Lance. Okay, one question that's come in from a couple of different directions. We kind of thought we had this figured out, saying you get your members to sign a waiver once a year when they renew. It's covered, it's easy, but like the league, a lot of clubs have multi-year memberships, 2- and 3-year memberships, so people aren't renewing every year. Is getting that signature every 2 or 3 years when they renew adequate, or do these clubs need to make sure they get a signed waiver from each of these members every year regardless of their renewal period?
Our recommendation is to get it every year. That's not, again, a magical number, but again, the longer in the past it is, the easier the person can say, oh, I don't even remember signing that. I didn't think it was still in force. I thought it only lasted a year. I mean, it all comes down to when the person is going to try to say it wasn't valid, that the club wants to be able to say it was valid. And it's not an exact science, but that is our recommendation as a best practice to protect your club would be to get those signed every year from your members. So I know it's an administrative burden, but the end result of it is to protect all of you. The people who are on the phone are probably the people doing all the work and running all the activities and making sure everything goes right. And so at the end of the day, you're the ones who are really being protected by it because you're the ones who will end up having to spend all the time being deposed and getting involved in the lawsuit. And if we can get it thrown out early by presenting a waiver or get them to just drop the claim, that is a good thing for you. So you have to balance that, I guess, dynamic, but we definitely recommend the once a year standard.
Okay, someone asked kind of a while ago, what is an LCI? LCI is a cycling instructor certified by the league, a league cycling instructor. For those of you that are unfamiliar with the term, I am sorry about that. We had a question about electronic waivers and another one about electronic signatures. Could you speak to those issues?
We know that electronic waivers are becoming more and more common, and electronic signatures, obviously, in today's world. Our claims department, I know we kind of check in with them periodically, has still not seen, and they do monitor this, but they haven't seen an electronic signature on a waiver case yet where it got upheld. Now, you know, logic might tell you that given the way society is going that it should be a valid and viable form, but we just don't know of one that's been tested in an actual lawsuit. We're kind of waiting for one so we can quit saying that because it seems like we've been saying that for a lot of years and you'd think odds are one would have come up by now. But what we do recommend is if you are going that avenue and you are getting the electronic signature, that you try to tie it to some type of a financial transaction or some way that you're able to validate that the person who signed it online is the person who is actually the rider or the participant. So that's the best case scenario there, is that you've got it tied to some type of a record. Because when you get a waiver in person, you're able to get the person's ID and confirm that that's who they are and have a protocol for that. Whereas online, you know, it could be their 12-year-old son who's actually done it. And when they get in an accident and they get hurt and you pull that out, they're going to say, oh, my son must have done that. I didn't have any involvement, and I didn't even know it was happening. And then you have to, you know, you're faced with refuting that. If you have the financial transaction, you're kind of able to say, so you have your 12-year-old son has your credit card and is, you know, able to will, you know, use it at will. So that's our recommendation on that point.
Okay. In a couple more questions we will do. If someone in representing their organization is giving a safety presentation at a bike shop, just talking to people about safe cycling, do they need to get a waiver signed for those participants?
If they're just teaching some basic bike safety principles to people who are at a bike shop, I would say no. I mean, it doesn't hurt, but I think that is an extra best practice. You know, the risk with those type of situations is that somebody stands there, listens to the presentation, goes out, gets on their bike, and gets in an accident, and somehow, you know, they come back and say, well, I ran that stop sign because so-and-so at this bike shop told me I didn't have to stop at them if I was on the road. And, or, you know, who knows what they're going to say. So it's a pretty remote, and so I don't know that you need to take that extra step, but it definitely can't hurt anything. If you have that documentation and you save it, if that ever did come up, then it'd be great to have that as a defense tool for yourself.
Okay, great. We have just hit 9:30 on the East Coast. We've gone our full hour and a half, an information-packed hour and a half. I do apologize to everyone who asked a question and did not get us to answer it on the air here. There were a lot of you. I'm sorry I couldn't get to all of it. As I said, we will review those and try to answer you by email tomorrow or certainly by the end of the week. We are trying to get a lot done with the new insurance year. So if we don't get back to you by the end of the week, let us know. You've got Renee's contact information. I am Scott Williams, the membership director at the league, scott@bikeleague.org. You can email me your questions, and I will get back to you about it. Thank you all for joining us tonight. And just, I guess, quickly, one more plug. While we're talking about emailing me, I am looking for speakers and topics for upcoming club leadership webinars. Would love to have some people talking about recruiting younger members, because I get a lot of requests for that. But anything you'd like to hear about or talk about, please get in contact. Marla and Renee, thank you so much for your time, for the information, and for helping out so many of our bike clubs over the years.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the business, and we look forward to talking to people over the next few days. And again, we'll try to get we will have the information up and available on the 21st to be able to start purchasing the coverage.